The Atlanta Serial Murders. Atlanta 1979 1981. The summer of 1979 in Atlanta, Georgia, was heavy with an unspoken dread. Children laughed in the streets, but their voices carried a nervous edge, as if the city itself was holding its breath. Over the next 2 years, a shadow would creep across the neighborhoods, claiming at least 28 lives, mostly young black boys, some barely old enough to tie their shoes, others young men on the cusp of adulthood. The Atlanta child murders, as they came to be known, weren't just a series of crimes. They were a wound that tore through the heart of a community, exposing fear, mistrust, and a chilling question: who was stealing these children from their homes, their schools, their ordinary lives? The bodies turned up in wooded lots, abandoned buildings, and, later, the murky depths of the Chattahoochee River. Each discovery tightened the grip of terror. Parents clutched their children closer, curfews choked the city, and whispers of a serial killer spread like wildfire. The victims, aged 7 to 27, were often snatched in broad daylight while running errands, heading to the movies, or playing near their homes. Most were strangled, their lives extinguished with a brutal intimacy that suggested a predator who knew how to blend in, how to lure, how to vanish. By 1981, the investigation had ballooned into a desperate manhunt. The FBI, Atlanta Police Department, and Georgia Bureau of Investigation joined forces, but leads were scarce. The city was a pressure cooker of grief and rage, with communities crying out for justice while accusing authorities of indifference toward their black victims. Then, a name emerged: Wayne Bertram Williams, a 23-year-old freelance photographer and self-proclaimed music promoter with a knack for inserting himself into the city's pulse. Williams was no hulking monster. He was slight, articulate, a man who seemed more likely to pitch a record deal than to choke the life from a child. Yet, fibers from his car and home, eerily similar to those found on multiple victims, pointed to him like a ghostly finger. In 1982, Williams was convicted of 2 murders, those of Nathaniel Cater, 27, and Jimmy Ray Payne, 21, and sentenced to 2 consecutive life terms. Authorities pinned 22 other killings on him, closing cases without further trials. The killing stopped after his arrest, a fact prosecutors leaned into heavily, but doubts lingered like fog over the Chattahoochee. The evidence, while damning, was circumstantial fibers, hairs, and a shaky alibi. No confession, no murder weapon, no eyewitness to the act. Some families screamed that the wrong man was in chains, that the real killer or killers still walked free. Others, including former FBI profiler John Douglas, argued Williams was guilty of some murders, but not all, suggesting a darker truth. Atlanta's nightmare might have had more than one architect. The case remains a labyrinth of horror and ambiguity. In 2019, Atlanta Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms reopened the investigation, hoping modern DNA technology might untangle the mystery. But the files, stacked in dusty evidence rooms, hold secrets that may never speak. Was Wayne Williams a scapegoat, a convenient answer to a city's panic? Or was he a cunning predator who slipped through the cracks of justice for all but 2 of his crimes? The answers lie buried in Atlanta's past, in the silent graves of the lost, and in the memories of a city that still shudders at the mention of those years. The air in Atlanta during the summer of 1979 was thick, not just with the Georgia heat, but with something else, something that clung to the skin like damp cloth. It started quietly, almost unnoticed, as if the city was too busy to see the darkness creeping in. On the 21st of July, Edward Hope Smith, a 14-year-old with a lopsided grin, vanished. 4 days later, Alfred James Evans, 13, disappeared too, last seen heading home from a movie. On the 28th of July, a woman scavenging for aluminum cans stumbled across their bodies, dumped side by side in a trash-strewn lot off Niskey Lake Road. Edward had been shot, Alfred strangled. The discovery was a gut punch, but Atlanta barely had time to grieve before the next blow landed. In September, Milton Harvey, 14, pedaled off on his bike and never came home. His body was found weeks later, discarded in a wooded area. Then came Yusef Bell, a 9-year-old with dreams bigger than his small frame. He was snatched in October, his body discovered in the abandoned E.P. Johnson Elementary School, strangled, his tiny hands still curled as if fighting back. By the end of 1979, Angel Linaire, 12, was found tied to a tree, her hands bound, her life stolen by a chokehold. The pattern was undeniable now. Young, black, vulnerable. The city's poorest neighborhoods, places like Dixie Hills, where hope was as scarce as streetlights, were being hunted. The fear was a living thing, slithering through Atlanta's streets. Parents stopped letting their kids play outside. Schools became fortresses. The Atlanta Journal-Constitution ran headlines that screamed of missing children, each story a fresh wound. By 1980, the body count was climbing. Clifford Jones, 13. Charles Stevens, 12. Latanya Wilson, 7. Kidnapped from her bed while her family slept. The killer was bold, snatching victims in daylight, leaving bodies where they'd be found, as if taunting the city. The police were drowning in tips, but every lead seemed to evaporate. The FBI joined in June 1980 after Latonya's abduction, but even their profilers were stumped. Was this one killer? Multiple? A cult? A hate group? Rumors swirled, each more terrifying than the last. The victims were connected by more than their deaths. Many knew each other, lived near each other, or crossed paths in the same tight-knit communities. They were kids who ran errands for pocket change, who hung out at arcades or skating rinks, who trusted too easily. The killer seemed to know their routines, their vulnerabilities. Some bodies bore traces of rare yellow-green carpet fibers, a clue that became the investigation's lifeline. But when a newspaper leaked the fiber evidence, the killer changed tactics. In April 1981, bodies started appearing in the Chattahoochee River, as if the murderer was trying to wash away his censor, his traces. The river became the investigation's focal point. Stakeouts were set up on all 14 bridges spanning the Chattahoochee in the Atlanta area. Night after night, officers huddled in the dark, ears straining for any sound. On May 22, 1981, at 2:52 a.m., the silence broke. A loud splash echoed from the James Jackson Parkway Bridge. A car sped off, turned around in a parking lot, and raced back across the bridge. The police gave chase, pulling over a white 1970 Chevrolet station wagon. Out stepped Wayne Williams, 23, his glasses glinting in the flashlight beams. He was calm, almost too calm, claiming he'd been tossing trash and was on his way to audition a singer named Cheryl Johnson. The police let him go. There was no body, no evidence, no probable cause. But 2 days later, Nathaniel Cater's body bobbed to the surface downstream, naked and lifeless. Williams was now the prime suspect. Williams was an enigma. Born in 1958 to schoolteacher parents in Dixie Hills, he was a bright kid who built his own radio station as a teen, dreaming of a career in music. He was no loner. He frequented radio stations like Wiggo and Woke, schmoozing with DJs and pitching himself as a talent scout. But his ambitions never quite panned out. By 1981, he was living with his parents, driving a beat-up station wagon, and chasing dreams that seemed to slip further away with each passing day. To the police, he was a nobody. To the profiler, he was a textbook case. A man whose failures fueled a need for control, whose charm masked a predator's hunger. The investigation zeroed in. Williams' alibi unraveled. Cheryl Johnson didn't exist, and the phone number he gave was fake. Fibers from his car, his home, even his German Shepherd matched those on Cater, Payne, and other victims. Dog hairs found on Patrick Baltazar's body were linked to Williams' pet. In 2007, mitochondrial DNA from hairs on Baltazar's body matched Williams' profile, a sequence so rare it eliminated 99.5% of the population. The evidence was a spiderweb, each thread tying Williams tighter to the crimes. On the 21st of June, 1981, he was arrested. The city exhaled, but the relief was tainted. The murders stopped, but the questions didn't blank. The trial in 1982 was a circus. Prosecutors wove a chilling narrative. Williams, a man obsessed with power, preyed on vulnerable black youth, luring them with promises of fame or money. The Fibers Luxair English olive carpet, found in only 1 in 8,000 Atlanta homes were their star witness. Eyewitnesses placed Williams with Cater and other victims. The defense fought back, arguing the evidence was circumstantial, the fibers too common, the witnesses unreliable. After 11 hours of deliberation, the jury convicted Williams of Cater and Payne's murders. He was sentenced to life in Hancock State Prison, where he remains, still proclaiming his innocence. But the story doesn't end there. The Atlanta child murders case is a house with locked rooms, and Williams' conviction only opened one. Families of the victims, like Camille Bell, mother of Yusef, called him a scapegoat, the 30th victim of a rushed investigation. Former DeKalb County Sheriff Sidney Dorsey, an Atlanta detective during the murders, claimed a white suspect would have sparked riots, implying Williams was a convenient target. In 1986, Spin magazine reported a secret GBI investigation into Ku Klux Klan involvement, alleging a Klansman named Charles Sanders confessed to killing victim Luby Getter to spark a race war. The claim was never substantiated, but it fed the doubts. John Douglas, the FBI profiler, wrote in Mindhunter that Williams was likely guilty of 11 murders, but not all 28. The victims' ages, causes of death, and dump sites varied too widely for one killer, he argued. Some bodies showed signs of sexual assault, others didn't. Some were found quickly, others months later. The chokehold strangulation pattern stopped after Williams' arrest, but other deaths unsolved, unpublicized, continued. In 2005, DeKalb County Police Chief Louis Graham reopened 5 cases, believing Williams was wrongly blamed. By 2006, the reinvestigation fizzled, with no new answers. The reopened cases in 2019, ordered by Mayor Bottoms, stirred hope but also pain. Families waited for DNA results, for closure that might never come. The evidence, decades old, was degraded or lost. The city had moved on, but the scars remained. Atlanta's black communities still speak of those years in hushed tones, of children who never came home, of a terror that felt personal, targeted. The Chattahoochee still flows, its waters carrying secrets no one can retrieve. And Wayne Williams, now in his 60s, sits in his cell, a man convicted but not silenced, insisting he was framed. What is the truth? Was Williams a monster who slipped through the net, guilty of more than the courts could prove? Or was he a pawn in a city desperate for answers, while other killers faded into the shadows? The Atlanta child murders are a puzzle with missing pieces, a story that chills not just for its violence, but for its unanswered questions. The names Edward, Yusef, Latanya, Nathaniel echo like a roll call of the lost, demanding we look closer, dig deeper, and face the darkness that still lingers in Atlanta's memory. The streets of Atlanta in 1980 buzzed with a nervous energy, like a city caught in the grip of a fever dream. The Atlanta child murders had sunk their claws deep, and the city was unraveling. Parents bolted their doors, kids swapped ghost stories about a faceless killer, and the police were scrambling like actors in a bad detective flick, chasing shadows that slipped through their fingers. But in the midst of this nightmare, there was a moment so absurd, so darkly comic, it could have been ripped from a Coen Brothers script. Picture it. Cops perched on riverbanks, hiding in bushes, staking out bridges like bumbling private eyes, their radios crackling with static, their eyes straining into the Georgia night. They were waiting for a killer to make a mistake, but what they got was a scene that teetered between tragedy and farce. It was the spring of 1981, and the Chattahoochee River had become the killer's new dumping ground. Bodies were washing up, bloated and silent, their secrets locked in the murky depths. The Atlanta Police Department, the FBI, and the Georgia Bureau of Investigation had exhausted every lead, psychics, tip lines, even bloodhounds sniffing through the pines. So they turned to the river, setting up stakeouts on all 14 bridges spanning the Chattahoochee and the Atlanta area. Night after night, officers crouched in the dark, swatting mosquitoes, sipping cold coffee, and listening to the water's restless churn. It was a plan born of desperation, a Hail Mary pass in a game they were losing, and it was about to get weird. On the James Jackson Parkway Bridge, a team of cops and FBI agents huddled like kids playing hide and seek, their breath fogging in the pre-dawn chill. They'd been at it for weeks, their nerves frayed, their patience thinner than the mist curling off the river. The city was screaming for answers. The mayor was breathing down their necks, and the media was circling like vultures. Every creak of the bridge, every rustle in the woods, set their hearts racing. Was this the night? Would the killer show his face? They didn't know what they were looking for, a shadowy figure with a body slung over his shoulder, maybe, or a car creeping across the bridge with its headlights off. They were fishing blind, and the river wasn't talking. Then, at 2:52 a.m. on May 22, 1981, it happened. A splash loud, deliberate, like a stone breaking the water's skin echoed through the night. The officers froze, their pulses hammering. Was it a fish, a branch, or something heavier, something human? Before they could process it, headlights flared. A Cara-white 1970 Chevrolet station wagon lurched across the bridge, tires squealing as it made a wild U-turn in a nearby parking lot and roared back the way it came. The cops snapped into action, their radios spitting orders. "Go, go, go!" someone barked. Squad cars peeled out, lights flashing, sirens silent to avoid spooking the driver. They cornered the wagon a mile away, boxing it in like a scene from a low-budget thriller. Out stepped Wayne Bertram Williams, 23, his glasses catching the glare of flashlights. He was calm, almost annoyingly so, his voice smooth as a radio DJ's. "What's the problem, officers?" he asked, hands in his pockets, a faint smirk tugging at his lips. The cops were thrown. This wasn't the monster they'd imagined. No ski mask, no blood-stained gloves, just a wiry guy in a button-up shirt, looking like he'd stepped out of a record store. Williams spun a story. He'd been tossing some trash off the bridge, nothing illegal, just littering. Mabiand was on his way to meet a singer named Cheryl Johnson for an audition. At 3 a.m., in the middle of nowhere, the officers exchanged glances. The story stank, but they had nothing concreteno body, no weapon, no probable cause. They searched his car, found nothing but a pair of gloves and some flyers for his music business, and let him go. The night swallowed him as he drove off, leaving the cops standing in the road, their guts twisting with the feeling they'd just missed something big. The next day, the river gave up its secret. On May 24, the naked body of Nathaniel Cater, 27, floated to the surface downstream from the James Jackson Parkway Bridge. He'd been strangled, his skin pale and waterlogged, his eyes staring blankly at the sky. The discovery hit like a thunderclap. The splash, the car, the Manet, all pointed to Williams. The police kicked themselves. They'd had him, right there in their hands, and let him slip away. The stakeout, mocked by some as a clown show, had worked. But the comedy was turning grim, and the city's laughter was choked with fear. Williams was now the center of the storm. The cops dug into his life, and what they found was a man who didn't fit the mold of a serial killer but didn't quite fit anywhere else, either. Born in 1958 in Atlanta's Dixie Hills, Wayne was a prodigy of sorts, building a pirate radio station in his teens, broadcasting to anyone who'd listen. He was a hustler, always chasing the next big break, hanging out at Wego and Wauk, pitching himself as a music mogul. But by 1981, his dreams were crumbling. He was 23, living with his parents, driving a beat-up station wagon, and peddling talent that no one seemed to want. He was charming, sure, but there was something off, a neediness, a hunger for control that set profilers' alarms ringing. The investigation became a high-wire act. The cops tailed Williams, watching his every move. They knocked on his door, asking for carpet samples, dog hairs, anything that might tie him to the bodies. Williams played it cool, even cocky, inviting them in, chatting like they were old friends. But his alibi was falling apart. Cheryl Johnson? She didn't exist. The phone number he gave? Bogus. And then there were the fibers, those damn yellow-green fibers, Luxair English olive, found on Cater, on Jimmy Ray Payne, on a dozen other victims. They matched the carpet in Williams' home, a rare type sold in only a handful of Atlanta stores. Dog hairs from his German Shepherd, Sheba, were found on Patrick Baltazar's body. The evidence was piling up, each piece a nail in the coffin of Wayne's freedom. The tension was electric. Atlanta was a city on edge, its people glued to their radios, their newspapers, waiting for the next twist. Would Williams crack? Would he confess? Or was he just a patsy, a convenient target for a city desperate to close the case? The media frenzy was relentless, with reporters staking out Williams' house, snapping photos of him taking out the trash. The Atlanta Journal-Constitution ran headlines that screamed of breakthroughs, while talk shows speculated about cults, Klansmen, or a lone psychopath. The black community, already battered by grief, was torn. Some saw Williams as a traitor, others as a scapegoat, a black man railroaded to calm a white city's nerves. The climax came on the 21st of June, 1981, when the police swooped in. Williams was arrested at his parents' home, his mother's cries echoing as he was cuffed and led away. The city erupted. Some cheered, others wept, and many just stood in stunned silence. The evidence was compelling. Fibers from his car, his home, his dog, eyewitnesses who placed him with Cater and Payne, a timeline that matched the murder's eerie rhythm. The splash on the bridge, that absurd midnight chase, had led them here. The stakeout, once a punchline, was now the key that unlocked the case. Or so they thought. But the resolution wasn't clean. Even as Williams was charged with the murders of Cater and Payne, the doubts crept in like damp rot. The fibers were damning, but they weren't DNA. They could have come from anywhere, the defense argued. The eyewitnesses? Shaky. Some with criminal records, others coached by cops eager for a win. And what about the other victims? The police linked Williams to 22 more killings, but no charges were filed. The killings stopped after his arrest, a fact prosecutors trumpeted. But was it proof or coincidence? Families like Camille Bell's, whose son Yusuf was among the lost, weren't buying it. They just wanted over, she spat, her voice raw with pain. Wayne's not the only one. The trial loomed, a spectacle that would grip the nation, but already the cracks were showing. The bridge stakeout, that moment of high drama, was starting to feel like a cruel joke. Had the cops caught a killer, or had they just snagged the first guy who splashed something into the river? The fibers, the hairs, the alibis, they were enough to convict, but not enough to silence the whispers. Atlanta wanted closure, but what it got was a question mark, etched in the muddy banks of the Chattahoochee. This wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of a deeper plunge into the shadows. The trial would bring more revelations, more twists, and a truth that might never fully emerge. Wayne Williams, the man caught in the headlights, was either a monster or a martyr, something in between. The city held its breath, waiting for answers, while the river kept its secrets, flowing cold and silent under the Georgia stars. The summer of 1981 in Atlanta was a cauldron of heat and suspicion, the air thick with the weight of unanswered questions. The Atlanta child murders had carved a jagged scar across the city, claiming at least 28 lives, mostly young black boys and men, their futures stolen in moments of chilling brutality. The streets, once alive with the chatter of kids, were now hushed, patrolled by fear and curfews. The Chattahoochee River, its waters dark and secretive, had become a grim stage for the killer's final acts. But now, the spotlight was on Wayne Bertram Williams, a 23-year-old music promoter whose name was whispered in every corner of the city. The police had their manner, so they thought. What followed was a high-stakes game of cat and mouse, a crescendo of evidence that would push Atlanta to the edge of hysteria, only to leave it teetering on the brink of doubt. The investigation had been a slog, a maddening puzzle with too many pieces missing. The FBI, Atlanta Police, and Georgia Bureau of Investigation had chased leads that crumbled like ash psychic visions, anonymous tips, even whispers of a Ku Klux Klan conspiracy. But the fibers, those yellow-green threads of Luxair English olive carpet, were the thread that held it all together. Found on the bodies of Nathaniel Cater, Jimmy Ray Payne, and a dozen others, they were as rare as a fingerprint, sold in only 1 in 8,000 Atlanta homes. When the police traced them to Williams' modest house in Dixie Hills, it was as if the heavens had parted. Dog hairs from his German shepherd, Sheba, found on Patrick Baltazar's body, tightened the noose. And then there was the splash that fateful night on the James Jackson Parkway Bridge, when Williams' white 1970 Chevrolet station wagon screeched into the police's crosshairs. The city was ready to explode, and the fibers were the match. The tension built like a storm rolling in from the Georgia pines. The police didn't just want Williams, they needed him. Atlanta was unraveling, its black communities seething with anger at a system they believed had ignored their children's deaths. The media was relentless, with WSB Television and the Atlanta Journal-Constitution splashing Williams' face across every screen and front page. Reporters camped outside his parents' home on Penelope Road, their cameras clicking like hungry insects. Williams, ever the showman, played to the crowd, stepping out in aviator sunglasses, waving like a celebrity. "I'm innocent," he'd say, his voice smooth as vinyl. "They've got nothing on me." But behind the walls were closing in. The cops were relentless, tailing Williams through Atlanta's streets, their unmarked cars lurking like ghosts. They knocked on his door, asking for more sample scarpet, clothing, even vacuum cleaner lint. Williams invited them in, his charm disarming, his home a shrine to his failed music dreams. Reel-to-reel tapes, flyers for non-existent bands, a microphone gathering dust. But the police weren't there for small talk. They were building a cage, and every fiber, every hair, was a bar. The dog hairs were particularly damning. Sheba's fur, with its unique undercoat, matched hairs on multiple victims. In 2007, mitochondrial DNA from hairs on Baltazar's body would confirm it, linking Williams with a sequence so rare it ruled out 99.5% of the population. But in 1981, it was the fibers that sang, their microscopic threads weaving a story of guilt. The city was a tinderbox, and Williams was the spark. Eyewitnesses began to surface, their stories piling up like kindling. A teenager claimed he'd seen Williams with Nathaniel Cater near the Chattahoochee, the two laughing like old friends. A neighbor swore she'd spotted Williams' station wagon cruising Dixie Hills the night Luby Gator vanished. Another witness, a young man with a rap sheet, said Williams had offered him a music gig, only to drive him to a secluded spot before backing off. The stories were shaky, some tainted by deals with prosecutors, but they painted a picture. Williams, the charming hustler, luring kids with promises of fame, only to snuff out their lives in the shadows. The high point came in June 1981, when the police uncovered a bombshell. A search of Williams' station wagon revealed a pair of gloves, stained with what looked like blood. The lab rushed the tests, and the results sent shivers through the task force. Human blood, type O, matching Nathaniel Cater's. The fibers from the car's upholstery matched those on Jimmy Ray Payne's body. And then, a chilling detail. A single strand of Williams' own hair, found on the shirt of victim Eric Middlebrooks. Its mitochondrial signature, a near-perfect match. The evidence was a symphony of accusation, each note louder than the last. The splash on the bridge, the fibers, the hairs, the blood, it was all converging, a tidal wave crashing toward Wayne Williams. Atlanta held its breath as the police prepared to strike. The media frenzy reached fever pitch, with talk shows dissecting Williams' every move. Was he a psychopath, hiding behind his glasses, an easy smile? Or was he a scapegoat, a black man framed to quiet a city on the verge of riots? The black community was split, some calling him a traitor who preyed on his own, others insisting he was a victim of a racist system. Camille Bell, mother of victim Yusuf, stood on the steps of City Hall, her voice trembling with fury. "They want this over," she said. "They'll pin it on anyone to make it stop." But the evidence was hard to ignore, and the city was desperate for closure. On the 21st of June, 1981, the dam broke. Police swarmed Williams' home, their sirens slicing through the morning calm. He was cuffed in his driveway, his mother's screams echoing as neighbors watched from their porches. The arrest was a spectacle, broadcast live on WSB television, the cameras zooming in on Williams' face calm, almost amused, as if he'd been expecting this. The city erupted in a cacophony of relief and rage. Some cheered, believing the monster was finally caged. Others wept, convinced the real killer was still out there, laughing in the shadows. The fibers, the hairs, the blood, they were enough to charge Williams with the murders of Cater and Payne, and the police linked him to 22 others, though no further charges were filed. The resolution, when it came, was as electrifying as it was unsatisfying. The arrest was a triumph for the task force, a vindication of their bridge stakeouts and fiber obsession. The killing stopped, a fact that prosecutors would later hammer home. But the victory was hollow. The fibers, while compelling, were circumstantial. No DNA in 1981 could seal the deal. The blood on the gloves? Inconclusive. The the sample too degraded for a definitive match. The eyewitnesses, many recanted or were discredited, their stories unraveling under scrutiny. And the other victims, Edward Hope Smith, Yusef Bell, LaTanya Wilson, what of them? The police closed their cases, pinning them on Williams without trials, but the families weren't convinced. The trial loomed, a circus that would draw the eyes of the nation. But already, the cracks were showing. Former FBI profiler John Douglas, who'd worked the case, believed Williams was guilty of some murders, but not all. The patterns don't match, he'd later write in Mindhunter. Some victims were kids, others adults. Some were strangled, others beaten. It's not one guy. The Ku Klux Klan theory, dismissed by police, lingered in the shadows, fueled by a 1,986 Spin magazine report claiming a Klansman named Charles Sanders had confessed to killing Luby Geter. The claim was never proven, but it fed the doubts. And then there was Williams himself, sitting in his cell, writing letters to the press, proclaiming his innocence with a conviction that was either delusional or chillingly sincere. The fibers had led them to Williams, but they couldn't answer everything. The blood, the hairs, the splash on the bridge, they were pieces of a puzzle that didn't quite fit. Atlanta wanted to believe the nightmare was over, but the city couldn't shake the feeling that something was still out there, hiding in the pines, waiting. The trial would be the next battleground. A chance to lay the ghosts, to restore, to stir them up again. Wayne Williams, the man at the center of it all, was either the devil or a pawn, and the truth was slipping further away with every passing day. Atlanta, Georgia, in the winter of 1982, was a city suspended between relief and unease. The trial of Wayne Bertram Williams, the man accused of the Atlanta child murders, had gripped the nation like a fever. The streets, once haunted by the specter of a killer, now buzzed with the hum of anticipation. Would justice finally silence the ghosts of the 28 lost souls children like Yusef Bell, young men like Nathaniel Catterer? Would it only deepen the mystery? The courtroom in Fulton County was a crucible, where truth and doubt collided in a spectacle that was equal parts theater and nightmare. The fibers, the hairs, the splash on the Chattahoochee River, they were the prosecution's weapons. But the defense wielded a sharper blade: uncertainty. What unfolded was a climax that promised answers but delivered a question mark, leaving Atlanta and the world hungry for more. The trial began on the 6th of January, 1982, in a courtroom packed with reporters, grieving families, and a city desperate for closure. Williams, now 24, sat at the defense table, his glasses glinting under fluorescent lights, his expression a mask of calm defiance. He was no longer the cocky music promoter waving to cameras. He was a man fighting for his life, charged with the murders of Nathaniel Cater, 27, and Jimmy Ray Payne, 21. The prosecution, led by Fulton County District Attorney Lewis Slayton, painted a chilling portrait. Williams, a failed dreamer consumed by resentment, preyed on vulnerable black youth, luring them with promises of fame before strangling them in a twisted bid for control. The evidence was a tapestry of science and circumstance, with those yellow-green Luxair English olive carpet fibers as its centerpiece. The fibers were the prosecution's star witness, their rarity, a damning indictment, found on Cater, Payne, and 10 other victims. They matched the carpet in Williams' homeotype, sold in only 1 in 7,920 Atlanta households. Dog hairs from his German Shepherd, Sheba, linked him to Patrick Baltazar and others. Their unique undercoat, a microscopic signature. A single strand of Williams' own hair, found on Eric Middlebrooks' shirt, carried a mitochondrial DNA sequence that would later, in 2007, exclude 99.5% of the population. Eyewitnesses bolstered the case. A teenager who saw Williams with Cater near the Chattahoochee, a neighbor who spotted his station wagon prowling Dixie Hills, a young man who claimed Williams tried to lure him with a music deal. The splash on the James Jackson Parkway Bridge, that fateful night of May 22, 1981, was replayed like a horror film, with prosecutors arguing Williams had dumped Cater's body before fleeing. But the defense, led by attorneys Al Binder and Mary Welcome, was ready to unravel the narrative. They attacked the fibers, arguing they were too common to be conclusive. Luxair carpet wasn't that rare, and fibers could transfer anywhere. The dog hairs? Sheba wasn't the only German Shepherd in Atlanta. The eyewitnesses were a mess. One had a criminal record, another admitted to cutting a deal with prosecutors, and a third recanted under pressure. The blood on Williams' gloves, touted as a breakthrough, was a dud. The sample was too degraded to confirm a match with Cater. And the splash? It could have been anything. A tire, a bag of trash, a fish. Williams took the stand, his voice steady, his story unwavering. He was a music promoter, not a murderer, out scouting talent that night, not dumping bodies. "I'm innocent," he said, locking eyes with the jury. "This is a setup." The courtroom was a pressure cooker, the tension palpable as the trial stretched into February. Atlanta was glued to WSB television, where nightly recaps dissected every twist. The black community was a house divided. Some saw Williams as a traitor, a predator who betrayed his own people. Others, like Camille Bell, mother of Youssef, called him a scapegoat, a black man framed to calm a city teetering on the edge of riots. Rumors of other killers saw a Ku Klux Klan plot, a cult, even a second serial killer swirled like smoke, fueled by a 1986 Spin magazine report claiming a Klansman named Charles Sanders confessed to killing Luby Geter. The prosecution dismissed it as a distraction, but the doubt was infectious. Former FBI profiler John Douglas, who'd worked the case, testified that Williams fit the profile for some murders, but not all the victims' ages, causes of death, and dump sites were too varied for one killer. The climax came on the 27th of February, 1982, after 9 weeks of testimony and 11 hours of deliberation. The jury, a mix of black and white Atlantans, filed back into the courtroom, their faces unreadable. The verdict hit like a thunderbolt. Guilty on both counts. Williams was sentenced to 2 consecutive life terms in Hancock State Prison, his mother's sobs drowned out by the courtroom's gasps. Outside, Atlanta erupted. Some cheered, believing the monster was caged. Others wept, convinced the real killer was still out there. The prosecution celebrated, pointing to the fibers, the hairs, and the fact that the killings stopped after Williams' arrest. They linked him to 22 other murders, closing cases without further trials, a move that felt like a bandage on a still bleeding wound. But the resolution was a mirage, shimmering with promise, yet dissolving on closer inspection. The fibers, while compelling, were circumstantial. No DNA in 1982 could seal the deal. The eyewitnesses crumbled under scrutiny, their stories riddled with holes. The other victims, Edward Hope Smith, Latonia Wilson, Clifford Jones, remained in limbo, their cases closed but not solved. Families like Camille Bell's refused to accept Williams as the sole killer. They wanted it over, she told reporters, her voice raw. They picked Wayne because he was there. Former DeKalb County Sheriff Sidney Dorsey, a detective during the murders, hinted at a darker truth. A white suspect would have sparked riots, making Williams a convenient target. The doubts didn't stop at the courtroom doors. In 1985, the Georgia Supreme Court upheld Williams' conviction, but questions lingered. A 2005 reinvestigation by DeKalb County Police Chief Lewis Graham reopened 5 cases, believing Williams was wrongly blamed. By 2006, it fizzled, with no new evidence. In 2019, Atlanta Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms reopened all 28 cases, hoping modern DNA technology would unlock the truth, but the evidence, decades old, degraded, or lost, remained stubbornly silent. Williams, now in his 60s, sits in his cell, writing letters, granting interviews, insisting he was framed. "I'm not the only one," he told a podcaster in 2020. "There's more to this story." The Chattahoochee River still flows, its waters carrying secrets no one can retrieve. Atlanta has moved on, its skyline gleaming, its streets alive again. But in Dixie Hills, in the quiet corners where the victims once played, the ghosts linger. The names Youssef, Latonia, Nathaniel echo like a prayer, demanding answers that may never come. Was Williams a monster who slipped through the cracks, guilty of more than the courts could prove? Or was he a pawn, a man caught in a city's panic while other killers faded into the shadows? The trial was supposed to end the nightmare, but it only opened a door to a deeper darkness. This isn't the end, it's a pause, a breath before the next chapter. The Atlanta child murders are a puzzle with missing pieces, a story that refuses to resolve. What lies beyond the verdict? Are there other killers, other truths, buried in the pines or hidden in dusty evidence boxes? The answers are out there, waiting to be unearthed. Stay tuned, because the next part of this chilling saga is coming, and it will plunge you deeper into the mystery. Follow the trail, subscribe to the channel, and join us as we unravel the secrets Atlanta still keeps.